what you see is that a lot of these things are woven into tradition, into culture, where
they are deep-rooted into culture.
Absolutely, where women's voices are minute.
You don't talk to a man like that.
I'm telling you, it starts from not even asking women to break collar. That's simple action in Igbo land where I come from. It's exclusive. So you go to an event, they say sit at the back, the men are in front, and you report to a pastor that you're facing abuse and aggression. They say go back home and fix your home. It's the woman that builds the home. And until you're dead, nothing is done. So
again, it's not just on survivors or those that died, right? There's also the effect on family members of such people. Because, for example, if a child's mother was killed in front of such a child, right, that particular child relieves that memory all through his life. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Some of them do not even come out of such things like that.
Well, I will just go back a little by saying that this thing about one chance kidnapping is still the women that are the victims. Mostly the women. Well, they used to kidnap you guys sometimes. Yeah. But anyways, mostly the women. But what I would just say is let justice be done. Let the judicial system be very strong. Because I don't see the reason there will be a case reported and there will not be justice served.
Hi guys, welcome to Timeline. My name is Paul. Our me here is
Joan Eze.
And also we have Adora, the Executive Director of Gender Strategy Advancement International, GSAI.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, ma'am.
It's good to see you guys.
So good to have you. You look so beautiful.
I feel so Gen Z here.
Well, again, you see, we can match things up meeting in the video somewhere.
I like
that. Okay.
Yeah.
No problem. At the moment, we're currently in the 16-day campaign of activism against gender-based violence. And this year we're focusing on the focal area that every 10 minutes, a woman is being killed. Hashtag no excuse, unite to end violence and against women. This is a very interesting one. And today we'll be talking on the specific topic of femicide. The WHO defines femicide as the intentional act of murdering a woman or a girl with this only reason that they are women, meaning that's killing women just because they are a woman, but just because of their gender. And statistics from UN Women states that 60% of these 5 women that were murdered in 2023 were murdered by either their intimate partners or their family members. Femicide was actually a term coined by feminists in the 1970s.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paul. Yeah. All right, to you, ma'am. Can you tell us what are those causes and contributing factors to femicide?
I think for me, I'd like to put it into perspective because again, femicide is such a tragic case of murder. And also homicide against women, mostly women, because they are the ones where the cases are higher in terms of statistics. And, it's quite frightening because, even with the awareness created on gender-based violence, the world continues to see a rise in femicide and not just gender-based violence on its own. So when it becomes femicide, it means that there are more cases of intimate partners who are murdering and causing death, causing harm to their female partners. And for instance, a country like Kenya sees 47 women killed every week as a result of femicide. And that means that, in a month, you can do your take on that. If 47 times 4, it means that you have over 200 or close to 200 women killed by intimate partners, within the space. I remember the sad case of Rebecca Cheptegei, who was a Kenyan athlete, a female Kenyan, who was burned by her partner. It made such a news on social media. She was just coming from church, trying to tend to her chickens. And the partner came out of the chicken coop. He hid in the house, held her down, poured fuel, made sure she was soaked, and then lit her. in broad daylight to the dismay of her 2 watching daughters. And that's just one. And then, of course, you remember the story of Osinachi, of us here in Nigeria, which we still say is ongoing even after that case has been highlighted. So you find that a lot of the women within those spaces, there are very serious, issues that surround economic dependence. Which is one. Most of the women, some of them are not empowered. Some who are empowered, the abuse begins by verbal abuse, it begins by, cyber stalking. It begins by making sure that she doesn't have access to family. So they're holding people within.
Isolate them
yes,
first. And
exclude them from people whose, help can get to them the easiest. And that's isolation. Another issue that you also want to look at is the fact that, the culture of underreported cases, the fact that a lot of women are afraid to speak out. They are worried about stigma. They're worried about stereotype. And remember, it's not just married women. In this case, we're talking about people in intimate relationships, people that are dating to marry, people who are just dating. And again, even by familiar people,
family members, father, uncles.
There's such things like honor killings comes to mind as well, where people are killed because you want to preserve the family name and you don't also want to marry outside the culture and the religion. So there are several causes. So religion is one of them. Tradition is one of them. You also look at the issue of the economics of, women becoming, lack of access to economic power because of lack of empowerment. So these are really the 3 direct cases. And again, amplifying voices. I think that a lot of these cases are underreported in the media, in the social space, because the women are either afraid or afraid to be shamed. Yes. Because the biggest worry for me is the fact that when they do come out to speak out, there's also the issue of re-victimization.
Yes.
Where people say, are you the only one? So you get that.
Yeah, even in the case of technology, I know that there are people that get ladies, they just try to lure them, send them messages to come to another state or another country just for them to be killed. I think there are cases where there was a man that lured 2 ladies, a girl, and asked her to bring her friend alongside with her. And when they got there, they ate everything and all that, but at the end of the day, they got killed.
Yeah, again, you mentioned something about cases being underreported, and I think that backs one of the statements of WHO and also Amnesty International, saying that most cases, especially in regions where the women are not economically strong, where they don't have enough money, where they are dependent on their intimate partner, that cases in such regions are usually underreported. What can be done to up cases to encourage women like that to report cases to the legal system?
So there are 2 ways to it. Our media must be inclusive and be open to see that they adopt, equitable storytelling methods, because again, frankly, even the media has its own share of masculinity in terms of having to have voices that are out there more masculine. In politics, as the male, because they can afford the media, in economics, just recently we saw more emergence of women CEOs and bank managers, taking over that, business space. But beyond that, I think that the real essence is in the community voices of women and how we are sort of chaperoning that using our platforms. And I say this because platforms are variant. I mean, this is a podcast. You have television, you have radio, you have the social media. Who are those telling the stories and what stories are they telling? Those are the questions. Do we need to actually say that more women need to start telling equitable stories? Women in the newsroom, the news editors, do they need to see more women's stories filter its way to mainstream media? Do we need to also say that in the family, there should be a response mechanism where daughters are allowed to be vulnerable and speak out? Because again, it also starts from the family, where you go and report a case and you are hushed. You're told not to talk about it. You're being abused by an uncle or your dad. And rather than have justice and get defense, your mother takes the side of your father. You don't find recourse to help. That comes in. And then finally, I would say in terms of, amplifying voices and the cases of underreporting is to create safe spaces.
Exactly. In terms of creating safe spaces now, there are some women that have actually tried to create safe spaces. We have women that are human rights defenders, we have journalists, and even some women in politics having amplifying their voice in scenarios like this. But even those women are also targets, both online and also offline, and sometimes they have fatal outcome according to the UN women. Again, how can we protect all of these women now that are being targeted? Because now they are defending what is going on. They are speaking their truths, but then they are also, again, being targeted either online or offline.
So safe spaces are like when you have the idea of a safe home. Okay. A safe home is somewhere nobody knows, where people can reach out for help, where victims of domestic violence, those who survive, can find, a covered space where nobody can actually further victimize them. And that means you don't know the address, you don't know the location, you don't know who you're talking to. In terms of finding feedback of where they are, that same thing applies to safe spaces. Safe spaces ought to be ambiguous. It ought to be a place of covering. It ought to be a place where, confidentiality is topmost. And it ought to be a place where, you can find the need to be vulnerable without feeling guilty. Now, in shaping safe spaces, it first of all starts by creating a solidarity group. For instance, women who have been abused or women who are survivors can decide to create a help group amongst themselves and begin to have conversations, first virtually. Because in that way, you're already creating a fence where they can speak unguardedly without being, ostracized or fingers pointed. You might decide to hold on and not use your camera, depending on what you want to have engagement in. But I think those gatekeepers, because that's what you refer to, the gatekeepers of the safe spaces are always going to have that. It's one of the risks of being an advocate. It's not something that is going to go away. I think what happens is, how do we protect them more? How do we create safety in having them gatekeep for those safe spaces are, needed for? And I think that's where we'll start from, making sure that our advocacy also includes them, amplify safety measures to include them. And again, the social media is such a broad environment. Anybody now is a journalist on social media. Everybody is sending stuff. So how do you manage information? How do you fact check? Those kind of information. And those are the things that we must begin to question as not just women, but as young people. So safe spaces, first of all, is in the mind. And while it's in the mind, you must think of making sure you protect the confidentiality of such a space.
Okay, again, now let's look at how this thing varies from region to region. In South America, for example, we have countries like Mexico, we have countries like El Salvador, where there's high rates of femicide in these regions. Even in Africa as well, in the last 1 year, right, Africa has had the highest numbers of all of these, right? And then I think also in Asia as well, where we have honor killings still even going on at the moment. And also we've had several movements come up here, come up there, but then all of these things still persist. What are those things that could be done to reduce this menace in our environment?
I think, when you talk about regions, I like to bring it closer home, because Africa is the first seat of engagement. It affects me, affects the next generation of girls, and it's all going to be in Africa. Now, how do we look at that numbers? I mean, Asia has been on the rise for a long time. Nepal, South Korea, North Korea. Like, for instance, in South Korea, there are about 32,000 young women who are killed between the ages of 13 and 18, on the rise. And 13% of young people say they don't feel safe. They don't understand what it means to be in a safe environment because their lives are always a threat. The same thing you find in Nepal, the same thing you find in Philippines. But when you come back to Nigeria or perhaps Africa, I just mentioned Kenya, you also have countries, of course, like countries that are at war, like Cote d'Ivoire, DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. You have Sudan, you have South Sudan. So you can imagine that there will be a heightened rate of femicide in countries with, terrorism or crisis or banditry. And then bringing it back home. And, Nigeria seems to also be on the rise because then you're seeing more women, killed in the process of crisis in regions where you have more issues of Boko Haram and insurgency. And again, exclusion from, economic power is also a lead to femicide. Having about, 10 million out of school children where at least 40% are girls is also an act that leads to femicide. FGM is an act of femicide. So there are several layers of femicide that you need to categorize. But in terms of real-time intimate partner murder, which is the increase that we are looking at in terms of femicide in Africa, that's where we see the increase. It's appalling because one, there are not enough implementation of the laws that exist. So we have the VAP Act, Violence Against Prohibitions of Persons Act. And then you find out the fact that the VAP Act that has existed from the time when it was actually reviewed to now, there's a call for repealing it. Repeal means to actually extinct it from existence. So the question is, if you want to repeal the VAP Act, what law do we now look at in terms of replacing that? So the call first is for lawmakers to first of all look at this particular piece of document of legislation to say, let's review it rather than repeal it. Let's amend it rather than repeal it. Areas where we find gaps, can we as a group, civil society, women groups, women voices, look at what can be done, especially in the fact that we seem not to have a space which talks about a lot of the online violence that you talked about, where young girls are manipulated offline, to meet their killers and their abusers offline. So these are areas. But in terms of, what we must do about it, I think legislation should be reviewed, not repealed. And then we need to implement a coexistence and collaboration with the police agencies who truly mean to guide the women in the spaces. And then I think that every one of us has a duty that when you see something, you say something from the family and mothers, sisters, friends. When you notice a woman or a young girl go into depression and you see a socio-psychological twist in her usual energetic gait, you need to report it. You need to say, there's something not right about my sister. There's something right about my friend. I think there's something there, but she's not talking. But how can we find a space for her to engage? And that's important.
Exactly. The home remains the most dangerous place for women and girls, according to UN Women. We're still on this particular issue, femicide. We're going to a short break now. Once we return, we'll go into solutions on how this can be cut from our society. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hey everyone, let's face it, our world today experiences numerous challenges. And guess what? Our community isn't off the hook either. Most of the world issues are either not talked about enough or never talked about at all. But here on Timeline, we've got you covered. We dive deep into issues that affect us every day, leaving behind footprints of wisdom, knowledge, and solutions. Think of it like a roadmap that keeps you on the track for success. So buckle up, because in this new season of Timeline, we're taking another trip through the past, the present, and navigate into a more promising future. Again, we're talking solutions, people. And let's make one thing clear. This is not your average blah, blah, blah convo. This is real talk with a side of inspiration and a sprinkle of wow. I never thought about it like that. I'm your host on this impactful ride. Together, we'll tackle the tough stuff, laugh a little, and find ourselves on the path to positive change. So what are you waiting for? Season 2 of Timeline will be loaded. Let's get started. Hop in, and let's drive straight into the hearts of issues shaping our world. Let's go. Oh, one more thing. Hit that subscribe button and let's take this ride together. Every day, amazing stories of hope and tenacity unfold across the globe. On Hued Hour, we dive into these inspiring tales and discuss the vital work being done in the humanitarian and development space. Humanity has never faced a shortage of challenges, yet we rise stronger through teamwork and determination. Though these remedies are often underreported, on Hued Hour, we advocate sustainable solutions. We bring you the latest and most impactful news on how lives are being changed. We engage with young change makers and experts who provide valuable insights into relief efforts and the challenges faced by local communities,
through a global perspective. Join us every Wednesday by 8 a.m. on Huge Network's YouTube channel as we embark on this journey of positive change.
You're welcome back to the Timeline, and we're talking about femicide, also known as feminicide. My name is Paul, and also here with me is
Joanese.
and then we have the beautiful Adora in the building.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so you've actually said a lot of wonderful things, and let's move to the impacts. There are a lot of impacts of femicide on women, especially the psychological trauma, the social part of it, and every other aspect. I want you to tell us, what are those psychological trauma and everything that's femicide actually causes?
All right, femicide is an act that actually takes the life of the female. So first of all, if they are alive, then it's considered as an act to cause femicide. But when we lose them to their partner's abuse, it's now femicide. Now, if we look at the women who survive it or who survive the attempted murder, it's not just a social psychological effect on them, it's also on the environs that they are in. So it could be family, it could be friends, it could be children. And that depends on the fact that if it is not caused within familiar spaces. Now, also there is something we'll call social withdrawal, where women now begin to withdraw from social activities. They no longer want to be able to be seen going out. They're not involved in conversations in a larger space. They are traumatized. And what trauma causes is fear. It causes paranoia, it causes anxiety, it causes, borderline disorder. It also causes, a psychological destruct that can actually lead to bipolar schizophrenia. So the mental issues are severe, but I think the biggest one is the tragedy of losing self, where the woman no longer believes in humanity enough to want to do anything more. And I say this because currently we've been running a series, on our network, GSI, relationships and red flags. And the ideal is that how do we even begin to identify who is a causant of femicide in the first place? How do you decide where a relationship will lead to violence? How do you know who to report in case of the first signs of aggression comes on? How do you also talk about the trauma of verbal and emotional abuse within familiar environs? And these are some of the things that, we need to start looking, because by that knowing, we are able to look at the level of impact, number of young girls who have faced this or women, and then able to find a place or a sequence in able to help them. One is to, first of all, identify the facts of the conditioning of the mind of the woman or the young girl who has gone through this. It's not just psychological, it's also social. And so you want to decide on what is the first forward conversation to have. Is it of the mind or is it of the total well-being? Because if it's of the mind, it means you're dealing with both psychosis, you're dealing with mental health and beyond. And if you're dealing with social, you're also dealing with withdrawal syndromes where they don't want to talk to anybody and they find everybody offensive. And sometimes it may not come across to somebody who is unknowing as a trait of femicide or attempted femicide. It may come off as somebody who is a snob or somebody who doesn't want to talk to people. And that's where you start to investigate.
Again, it's not just on survivors or those that died, right? There's also the effect on family members of such people. Because, for example, if a child's mother was killed in front of such a child, right, that particular child relieves that memory all through his life. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Some of them do not even come out of such things like that. And again, some of them might even be afraid to even go into marriage and things like that, having to want have any intimate partner, right? And then there's also the effect on family members of the disease now in cases where they die, right? Meaning that this one, now you've lost a family member. That particular family member might have been the breadwinner of such a family. And so again, it boils down to the fact that now they have to start from the beginning, right? And then now that their breadwinner is gone, they have to start looking for new ways to get things, new means of survival.
Yeah, even speaking on that breadwinner thing, like the economic aspect of it is that there will be low productivity, there will be low income. People are, because, women normally, sorry to say, Paul, like we are more industrious than, I don't know. But
are you sure Paul will agree with that?
I don't know, but anyways, I just know that we are more industrial.
I'd rather stay mute on that.
But anyways, like the essence of this is when women are being killed, the economic part of it suffers and we have low productivity and all. So let's now go straight to the strategies on how this can actually be solved, this particular problem, because it's a very huge problem actually.
We have countries like El Salvador now that has laws that they have the maximum of 50 years for anyone who commits femicide, as opposed to so they treat femicide differently from normal murder, from homicide. So if you kill a woman just because she's a woman, right, there's a different sentence. In Brazil, for example, as well, this clearly stated in their law. We have countries like Cyprus and a few other. In fact, a lot of countries in South America actually have this passed into law, into their judicial system. So what other things can be done to ensure that we are not facing these issues in our environment?
All right. So when we talk about Croatian countries or countries in the Middle East or countries in South Asia and some of the countries you've mentioned, they took a long road to be able to get those laws into place. So they started with one, amplifying social policies that demand accountability in governance for women issues. They also had to re-strategize the composition of their policing, to become more community-based. And in making it more community-based, what they decided to do was to also have a centered police force that focused on issues such as femicide, gender-based violence, sexual and gender-based violence, which then now became a bill that was now passed through legislation and, reviewed over time. And then what really got it to be passed was the amplification of women on the streets, right? So in countries like Salvador, Brazil, for instance, Nepal, there was a 1,000 women's march, which held for over 2 weeks, that ensured that women did not go home, they did not eat. Some of them went topless to be able to continue consistently demanding that their women's lives matter. Now, you look at that and just oppose it with Africa. I mean, just with NSAS, you saw how that happened. Yes. You saw the march on femicide in Kenya. There were about, I think, 900 to 1,000 women who marched. And that was what got the world talking about the increase of femicide in Africa. Now, what has Kenya done? Kenya has decided to review its laws and to be able to say, we do know we have a death penalty, a restraining order, and of course, a name and shame in communities for people who are seen to victimize, not just kill women, victimize women, manipulate them, whether emotionally or verbally, before even going into aggression. But the thing about laws is it's good to be a piece of literature, but what is most important is how you implement it. And who are those implementing? How do we demand accountability for what's not done? And how long do you review, evaluate, monitor to what needs to be done, to when it's supposed to be done? And same thing comes back to Nigeria. We have the Child Rights Act. We have the VAP Act. We also have the Sexual Offenders Law, which is, of course, sex against grades that we see in the university that was passed by the former Deputy Senate President. So we are not bereft of policies and laws. I think what we do need is to hold accountability to implementation to those laws. And what other countries have done is just to amplify the voices of women, not just women, but men for women and men in those spaces, such as yourself, what you're doing, to speak to the real root causes of femicide. And what that means is that we're going to schools, we're going to the family, we're going to the mosque, we're going to churches, we're going to corporate spaces. These are some of the places where we need to amplify voices. And then have young girls talk, create safe spaces for them to engage, name and shame, I have the remarkable opportunity to, once in a while I read. I mean, Grace Judy, she holds a motivational, conversation on, what people can do, affirmative actions, how to speak out. We need more girls, amplifying voices like that. We need more girls coming out like that to say, I know this has happened, but what next? What do we do? Hold gates for others, just as you have been able to hold the gates for yourself. And I think finally is to make sure that being vulnerable is not seen as a crime. Because it's often said that in the African palace, you're not the only one. Not only you will happen to, get over it and move on. It is in that moving on that silence occurs. Is in that moving on that voices are suppressed. Is in that moving on that people think it's okay because you're not speaking out. So I think that we should allow our girls to be vulnerable enough to talk about their issues, and parenting should be more open-minded. I mean, yes, do not spare the rod and spoil the child, but you may not even give the child a room to be spoiled, and you will lose her in the process. And I say, let's go back to also teaching our boys the right standards of sisterhood and love, and and togetherness, because it starts from what a young child learns as he becomes an adult. What he thinks aggression is. Boys don't cry, men are tough. Boys take charge. Don't let a woman speak down at you. You're always in charge. You're the head. So once you just heard that girl, you're the head of the family. So you're heading everybody. You know what I mean? So it's not about button fisting. It's about actually being able to cover. And that's what, we think our boy children should be taught to do with their girls.
Again, I know that you've actually mentioned a lot about men, because I was actually about to enter there, because we're saying women this, women that, women that. Again, women are just the victims of all of these things, right? There are some people behind it that are really doing it. And again, what happens to these men? How were they oriented that made them do all of these things? And then you said that, okay, what should be done now is that you educate them from while they are young. As they should, even how you act again in front of them as a man, as a grown-up man now. You shouldn't show aggression that, okay, I'm the head. Truly, you're the head, right? But there are ways to lead by following as well.
Absolutely.
So you could always, you can always do that. It's not that you'd try to pass your message through aggression and things like that. All of those little aggressions that they see, again, you only plant a seed of aggression in them, and then it grows into something bigger than aggression. And all of these things are things that lead into femicide.
Well, I'll just say that you really said a lot of things, and very, very most importantly, let the laws be implemented. That is where I stand, and let voices not go down. Anybody that has been led into this kind of bad thing to do, like the femicide, and women are being killed for being women, it should be reported. Let's correct data, research, let it be taken down. People should report cases. Let nobody be silent. And of course, parenting too, it should also be open-minded. People shouldn't be forced to, let people don't feel silent about things that they're not supposed to be silent about. And I feel with that, everybody's going to be fine. And
let me just give you an example. 2 days ago, I was invited to be on a TV program, and the producer sent a flyer, and usually I'll send to my team or my producers within my network to amplify the conversation. It was on gender equality and creating more spaces for girls. And I just sent a broadcast. And it happened to have been sent to a very high person up there, a very important male figure. And guess the response he sent me. He sent me, "You agent of darkness, you're too late." That was his response to me. Now imagine that man as a husband, as a father, as a coach, as a boss, and he's telling me. And I had to ask, I said, "Sorry, excuse me, sir, is this message to the pastor or to the devil? Or is it meant for me?" And he blocked me.
Interesting. Instead
of responding. And so I sent a message. I said, there's room for rehabilitation, whatever it is, because this is mental.
Yeah.
So you can imagine that kind of response for somebody who sees a flyer that says, have more spaces for women, create, platforms for women to have equal rights. And the first thought is, these people want to come and teach our girls, to take our space, to lord over us. And so we are now agents of darkness.
Threatening, like.
So that's just a simple example of even someone who is
really
lettered to think of it in that small space. Talk less of when you're dealing with a parliament that is filled with men.
Again, I'm out here shouting that it's not kill women. No. Let it be on record, please.
We hear you.
Again, right, we have government that's taking their stand one way or the other. Do you feel like government should have a stronger stand? And again, what do you personally recommend that should be done to end all of this?
I think government should have political will. I don't think they have political will because, like I said, we're not bereft of policies and laws. We even have a demand of 35%, in elective positions and appointed. We're also asking for extra seats, which they have made available, passed into second reading on 74. We're hoping that it gets to a place where Mr. President, the First Lady, institutions can say enough is enough. Okay, this thing is taking too long. Can we actually just look at having an executive bill? An executive bill comes from the president and says, let's have this number of women in governance. Let's have this number of women in politics or in elective positions at the parliament. And let's have laws that says that anybody who is caught committing femicide, this person has flouted the law, would not only be, facing a penalty of maybe 100 years in prison. South Africa castrates. We are fine committing femicide against women in South Africa, and not just femicide, including rape of any sorts. First of all, you go through castration. I mean, I see Paul's eyes here. I don't know if it's frightened about that, but that's just one arm of implementation that is taking its place in South Africa. South Africa is known for issues of violence, post apartheid and all that, but it's improving looking at more stringent laws for people who commit aggression against women. So I say, let's have the political will back here in Nigeria, because it is a political will that will cause implementation, that will cause laws to be obeyed, that will cause laws to be passed, so that perpetrators and would-be perpetrators will be deterred from committing more offenses. And those who abide by it, who encourage it, whether culturally or traditionally, will look at their cultures and review it. Because again, Paul, what you see is that a lot of these things are woven into tradition, into culture, where
they are deep-rooted into culture.
Absolutely. Where women's voices are minute.
You don't talk to a man like that.
I'm telling you, it starts from not even asking women to break collar. That's simple action in Igbo land where I come from. It's exclusive. So you go to an event, they say sit at the back, the men are in front, and you report to a pastor that you're facing abuse and aggression. They say go back home and fix your home. It's the woman that builds the home. Yes. And until you're dead, nothing is done. So I still go back to one, political will of the government. Let us look at activating, institutional responsibility by making sure that the leadership itself can be held accountable for not passing those laws.
Yeah. Well, I'll just go back a little by saying that this thing about one chance kidnapping is still the women that are the victims. Mostly the women. Well, they used to kidnap you guys sometimes. Yeah. But anyways, mostly the women. But what I would just say is let justice be done. Let the judicial system be very strong. Because I don't see the reason there will be a case reported and there will not be justice served. Because when people are being served, like are being taken to prison, or because I believe in if you kill by sword, you die by sword. Like that's what I believe. So if you've won the garment of femicide, you want to be killing women. That's what you want to be doing now. You have to face the wrath of the law, so that others that want to even think of venturing into the act will learn and refrain from it. So that's why I stand.
Exactly. Judicial reform, a political will are things that we need to make our homes a safe space for women and also girls. And I guess that's how we'll wrap things up today here on Timeline. It's been a wonderful episode. And don't forget that there's no excuse. It's time for us to all unite and to ensure that women are not at risk of all of this violence again. My name is Paul, and with me here for this episode was
Jonese.
And also we had the beautiful voice of...
I'll say if you kill by the sword, we take the sword from you. My name is Adora.
Thank you so much.
Bye for now, guys.
Bye.